Picture waking tomorrow to discover every living creature on Earth has vanished completely overnight. No cattle, no mules, no wasps, no hounds, no sharks. Absolutely zero. Only yourself, varied greenery, alongside an incredibly eerie, deafening quiet. How many days would you actually survive? 7 days? Perhaps 14? Consider this reality. Many individuals might claim, well, I'll merely consume veggies and solve the problem. Naturally, this appears quite logical. Before recognizing that tilling soil requires heavy oxen and traversing deep streams remains impossible without riding capable equine companions. You cannot successfully maintain growing harvests unless bugs actively fertilize them. Instantly, that highly positive personal survival strategy begins resembling an incredibly sluggish, famished, and profoundly freezing inevitable demise. Yet this scenario remains incredibly real. Such conditions accurately represent the daily struggles prehistoric mankind endured across countless thousands of past centuries. Their complete society, everything they constructed, whatever they consumed, each conflict they conquered, each freeze they endured, relied thoroughly and completely upon wild beasts. Surprisingly enough, the vast majority possess absolutely zero understanding regarding how profound this critical reliance truly remained. Whenever folks consider wildlife alongside early mankind, their primary thoughts instantly drift toward raw flesh, tracking, primitive weapons, and massive woolly prehistoric elephants. Certainly this comprises one aspect. Yet concentrating solely upon flesh resembles claiming current remains exclusively valuable since it charges a mobile device. Factually accurate, yet you overlook roughly 99% overall context. We must discuss energy initially, since lacking energy, you perish. Plain and straightforward. Throughout primitive human existence, prior to farming truly taking root roughly 10,000 years backwards, mankind survived hunting-gathering. This implies each waking dawn involved balancing between finding sufficient sustenance to persist versus avoiding becoming digested by predators who were similarly striving to persist. Now consider the harsh truth concerning flora-focused scavenging. Vegetation proves dietarily inconsistent. Indeed, fruits alongside underground stems seem wonderful, yet remain highly weather-dependent. They vanish during frost. They fluctuate drastically across landscapes. Furthermore, importantly, these cannot deliver remotely adequate lipids or proteins required for an evolving hominid mind functioning at its maximum potential. Mankind's mind acts like an energy-devouring behemoth. It burns roughly 20% of our overall fuel while resting completely inactive. Consequently, to develop plus support a mind this massive, one requires creature lipids. Scholars examining ancient nutritional habits recently discovered that the spectacular growth defining mankind's modern intellect, which uniquely shaped humanity, correlates closely alongside significantly amplified flesh ingestion practices. Tracking game wasn't merely recreational. Rather, it supplied essential biological combustion, driving human intellect. Furthermore, consider the crucial lipid dilemma. Lipids represent beyond simple basic macronutrients. To primitive mankind, lipids acted as life currency. Whenever freezing weather arrived, climates plunged, and vegetation perished. The solely dependable energy-packed nutritional resource remaining involved creature lipids completely. One massive slaughtered beast, perhaps buffalo, mastodon, or elk, might supply adequate energy plus lipids to nourish a tribe of hominids throughout several days or consecutive weeks. Lacking this, famine strikes. Your physique begins digesting inner musculature. Internal bodily systems commence failing. Disease resistance utterly crumbles. Then death arrives. Likely whilst feeling extremely freezing alongside entirely bewildered regarding where all those fruits disappeared. Yet things become substantially more fascinating right here. The subject extends beyond mere flesh consumption. Whenever primitive trackers downed a beast, they never simply consumed raw muscle then abandoned it. Such actions represented absurd squandering which zero rational individuals persisting along the harsh brink of starvation might conceivably undertake. They repurposed all. Skeletons, forcefully shattered extracting core. among the absolute highest energy-packed nutrients found throughout natural environments. Skeletal core basically represents environmental butter. Luxurious, greasy, vastly wholesome. Furthermore, historical proof suggests ancient populations routinely fractured heavy beast skeletons, extracting paste much earlier than they developed advanced implements, meaning multiple hundreds of past millennia. Pelts, meaning garments, meaning tents, meaning sacks hauling various supplies. Lacking creature pelts, one could never endure freezing seasons across the upper global latitude. One cannot warm their bodies adequately utilizing vegetative matter. Foliage never forms a jacket. Tree skin never equals a quilt. Prehistoric populations understood this. Contemporary citizens bundled inside synthetic polymer insulated coats have completely neglected this reality. Ligaments alongside connective tissues, meaning cords. Meaning archery strings. Meaning threads keeping your attire intact. Lacking creature connective tissues. Constructing archery remains impossible. Minus such weaponry, your striking distance shrinks drastically. Decreased striking distance guarantees dietary choices plummet. Absolute domino effect. Guts plus bladders, liquid vessels, boiling sacks. Prehistoric hominids discovered quite quickly how one might stuff a beastly gut using moisture, utilizing this for moving hydration throughout vastly extended geographic journeys. One might submerge scorching rocks inside for simmering meals thoroughly. That wasn't culinary. That meant engineering. Skeletal fragments, implements, sewing pins carved utilizing avian remains, catching barbs crafted utilizing aquatic remains, slicing edges fashioned utilizing creature rib cages. Several remarkably advanced primitive implements mankind ever forged avoided utilizing rocky materials altogether. They utilized skeletons. Rocky implements receive substantial historical attention, whereas skeletal equipment remains unjustly ignored completely. Greases from beasts, combustible lighting fluid. This factor proves massive while frequently remaining overlooked. Lacking creature lipids for combustion, primitive hominids lacked any dependable illumination during nocturnal blackness. One simply cannot maintain thriving civilizations, nor produce artistic expression, nor strategize, nor maintain advanced communal structures whenever every citizen becomes entirely sightless and powerless, precisely when evening daylight eventually fades away completely. Creature grease lanterns essentially became the technology extending constructive mankind activities past daytime limits. From certain perspectives, beastly lipids acted as initial power. Plus another crucial detail: dung. Hardly considered elegant, yet as civilizations shifted toward primitive farming cultures, beast excrement functioned as the essential nourishment, ensuring your harvests survived. Lacking such compost, Earth drains vital minerals, producing successive harvest disasters consecutively, eventually forcing populations back toward sheer starvation status. Thus, absolutely. Feces also remained culturally indispensable. Kindly appreciate that graphic visual. Roughly 10,000 through 15,000 years backwards, an event occurred forever altering mankind's core developmental societal path. Mankind began taming beasts. Admittedly, this appears basic. Well, folks merely chose keeping a few creatures nearby. Incorrect. Absolutely, utterly incorrect. That remained no flippant sudden choice. That represented the absolute greatest tactical shift across mankind's timeline, occurring slowly, chaotically, alongside tremendous amounts of experimental failures, wherein majority attempts likely resulted in unlucky individuals suffering severe biting wounds. Canines arrived initially, plus their specific chronology remains profoundly intriguing to analyze. Hounds became tamed roughly spanning 15 to 40 millennia backwards. Guesses differ regarding timber wolves. Just consider the reasoning. Hounds offered early mankind phenomenal advantages: preemptive threat detection, an active stalking companion, a flock manager, plus subsequently protective security. Canine olfactory senses remain vastly unmatched compared against mankind's, meaning integrating hounds into tribal units practically mirrored owning living surveillance monitors, simultaneously assisting hunters in tracking delicious moving targets. Those factions possessing hounds became instantly, staggeringly more successful regarding longevity, compared against those tribes lacking them. Subsequently arrived rams alongside ewes, roughly 10,000 years backwards. Rams represent the supreme resilient creature, incidentally speaking here. These remain incredibly robust. These consume practically whatever. They supply dairy, flesh, pelt, plus antlers. Provided primitive hominids possessed a multi-purpose tactical gadget as living beast that represented the ram. Furthermore, dairy, which deserves its specific spotlight. Dairy proved revolutionary, since liquid sustenance guarantees people maintain an unending regenerating nutritional fountain, completely bypassing lethal creature slaughtering. Keepers might maintain their flock whilst continually dining. Such represents entirely distinct financial reasoning versus tracking, which forever altered precisely how early civilian communities became organized. Afterwards, bovines. Afterwards, swine. Afterwards, equines. Truly, equines merit their specific comprehensive segment, frankly. However, prior to reaching that, we must discuss an aspect lacking vastly adequate historical appreciation, both mental alongside cultural impacts surrounding creature taming. As mankind began rearing beasts, they acquired far beyond mere dietary provisions. They obtained shields deflecting environmental unpredictability. Unexpected starvation? Butcher those captives. Brutal frosts? These beasts persisted steadily despite complete agricultural harvesting failures. Aridity? Relocate your flock. Entire notions regarding prosperity throughout early farming civilizations were physically quantified via living creatures. Throughout prehistoric Mesopotamia, across olden Nile regions, spanning primordial Hibernia, spanning prehistoric Bharat, bovines meant money. Ewes represented financial reserves. Any flock acted as treasuries. Consequently, bovine theft constituted an incredibly massive component throughout all primordial military conflicts. One wasn't merely thieving sustenance, one systematically dismantled another's complete financial infrastructure. Should someone need selecting one creature whose taming primarily exponentially expedited mankind's societal advancement, that conclusion remains undoubtedly the equine. Equines became domesticated across sprawling Eurasian steppes, likely spanning 3,500 towards 4,000 BCE generally. Consequently, virtually instantaneously, they revolutionized multiple disparate spheres concerning mankind's existence, all completely concurrently. Combats initially. Prior to equines, infantries marched continuously. Any marching battalion might successfully traverse approximately 25 through 30 kilometers daily during highly favorable weather conditions. Any cavalry atop equines, exponentially further. Those Genghis battalions, as instance, famously traversed 100 kilometers or further daily, while actively sprinting whenever circumstances demanded. Incorporating mounts throughout battlefields never merely rendered military brigades distinctly swifter. This utterly transformed combative planning, logistical chains, the mechanics behind unexpected assaults, alongside eventually determining which societies plus nations achieved supremacy versus those who were utterly crushed. That chariot, fundamentally an equine-driven armaments vehicle, functioned as prehistoric humanity's version of armored tanks. Empires that possessed these while perfecting usage became virtually unbeatable against societies lacking them. Regarding Hittites, the Nile dwellers, and Assyrians, perfecting equine-driven conflict remained the absolute greatest combative superiority throughout that primordial era spanning beyond an entire millennium of time. However, bloodshed constitutes merely one sole factual component. Commerce plus correspondence. Preceding mounts. Knowledge circulated at pedestrian strolling speeds. Cargo moved at pedestrian velocities. This dictated that kingdoms remained constrained regarding scale, since nobody could properly rule lands requiring months of distant marching. These mounts shrank geography. They permitted couriers to transport vital intelligence swifter, permitted traders to haul products across vast expanses, permitting royal bureaucrats to physically inspect the borders of vast realms prior to perishing from natural senescence. That Achaemenid imperial highway network, spanning beyond 2,500 kilometers, connecting Susa towards Sardis, proved operationally practical, purely since builders preserved it for mounted travelers. Any transit pathway designed for pedestrians might merely render it marginally simpler to amble incredibly sluggishly toward an inevitable demise. Cultivation. Pulling equines, heavier, intensely robust variants bred exclusively toward agricultural labor, might till any meadow exponentially swifter than cattle. These moved quicker, they traversed greater terrain, plus gradually these permitted cultivators to harvest broader acreages utilizing identical manual labor quotas. Expanded acreage, increased crops, expanded populations, advanced societies. That tilling equine remains among the incredibly undervalued catalysts throughout worldwide farming lore. Furthermore, mentally, these equines granted early mankind something staggering: velocity mimicking dominance. Throughout majority of mankind's timeline, people represented comparably sluggish creatures. Humans aren't particularly swift. Humans aren't exceptionally mighty. Mankind lacks sharp talons or toxins. However, place some rider atop an equine, then instantly you produce a hybrid that outpaces nearly everything, traverses massive expanses, exerts dominance via a thoroughly novel method, and remaining completely truthful, appears phenomenally frightening to observers who haven't ever witnessed such spectacles previously. Recorded chronicles detail native populations who hadn't previously interacted with equines, responding with sheer horror toward galloping Spanish invaders. Several believe that beast alongside rider formed one unified entity, a divine beastly manifestation, which from strict biomechanical perspectives, a heavily sprinting military steed arguably represents rather accurately. Alright, thus we address those massive spectacular subjects: tracking, taming, equines, battles. Yet we must reserve a minute to discuss those creatures which early mankind relied upon through methods appearing less obvious, highly nuanced, yet frankly vastly more essential. Bugs, particularly honeybees. Provided you assume mankind tamed pollinators purely since they desired nectar, while nectar remains scrumptious, we won't falsely argue otherwise. You overlook the drastically wider context entirely. Hive wax represented one of the vastly adaptable resources throughout all prehistoric realms. Folks utilized this to coat timber while repelling moisture. Craftsmen utilized this for greasing various implements alongside primitive mechanisms. Artisans utilized this for crafting tapers which burned beyond standard creature grease lanterns. Healers applied this throughout remedies serving as foundations for salves. Scribes utilized this to inscribe upon waxen slates, which acted practically like prehistoric counterparts for whiteboard displays, and the foundation for bureaucratic document storage before parchment turned universally common. Furthermore, that nectar itself, predating processed sucrose, nectar functioned as the singular dependable sugary additive, accessible across majority primitive societies. Yet vastly crucially, nectar never rots. Never ever. Excavators recently discovered nectar inside old Nile sepulchres, which remains beyond 3,000 years, aged yet wonderfully consumable. To primitive societies who continually battled concerning meal storage, the capacity for hoarding nectar perpetually appeared practically supernatural. Healers additionally applied it as antibacterial medicine. Plus it functions, incidentally speaking here. Contemporary science subsequently verified that nectar possesses legitimate bacteria-killing characteristics. Prehistoric Nile residents actively applied nectar atop injuries multiple millennia before humanity invented antibiotics. Furthermore, consider those caterpillars, which independently forged one of the supremely vital commercial pathways throughout mankind's timeline, the Silk Route. Factually titled Reflecting the Output from a Larva, this trade route linked Asia towards Rome, transporting not solely fabric, however, concepts, theologies, plagues, inventions, and arithmetic, spanning whole land masses across beyond a full millennium. This occurred since somebody across archaic Asia discovered how tiny winged insects produce strands which could be loomed, creating textiles so phenomenal that populations across the opposite hemisphere of this globe might exchange ridiculous treasures to acquire them. Homing birds, preceding digital networks, predating broadcasts, prior to telegraphs, whenever someone required delivering important dispatches across vast spans rapidly, they deployed a bird. Tactical generals deployed these to synchronize soldier positioning. Traders launched these to broadcast currency shifts before competitors might respond. During Global Conflict I, hardly archaic times, however, this underlying concept persists. Homing avians rescued whole regiments via transmitting notes whenever every alternative signaling methodology completely failed. A bird called Cher Ami remarkably transported one dispatch, which rescued almost 200 cornered U.S. fighters, despite suffering gunshot wounds, piercing its breast mid-journey. One fowl rescued 200 troops, merely executing its duty. Bulls and mules, unattractive, mostly disregarded throughout mainstream lore. Completely crucial, such beasts served as lorries, as hoists, as tractors, representing building machinery throughout the prehistoric realms. Each monumental stone piece transported, each crop yield hauled toward the storehouse, each massive wooden log dragged to construct some vessel or some dwelling or some shrine. Everything regarding this labor remained entirely energized through these stout creatures. That complete structural foundation regarding primitive society was erected upon their spines, physically. So here arrives the segment which most folks never ponder over. Primitive societies never merely exploited beasts, they idolized them. Plus, that isn't some accident. Whenever one's existence remains entirely reliant upon anything, one doesn't merely admire it. One exalts it. One deifies it. One deems it divine. Prehistoric Nile cultures worshiped deities possessing beastly skulls, Anubis sporting the canine snout, Horus sporting the raptor beak, Sobek sporting the alligator. This wasn't arbitrary. Every single creature symbolized factors these Africans truly relied upon, alongside dreaded, alongside felt, amazed toward. This canine represented the Undertaker, that beast which guarded the threshold separating existence and demise. This raptor possessed the keenest vision, traversing the clouds, while remaining the supreme emblem denoting sovereign authority. That alligator dominated the river, that waterway which granted Africa its whole society. That steer, Apis, the holy ox, was actually venerated like some breathing deity throughout early Africa, handled exhibiting greater respect compared against mankind, since bovines proved absolutely vital toward existence. Throughout Vedic religions, the heifer remains revered currently, yet outsiders frequently ridicule this lacking comprehension regarding whence it originates. Throughout prehistoric farming Bharat, one bovine represented far beyond a nutritional fountain. It equaled a dairy generator, a fertilizer plant, a tilling tractor, plus a holy emblem denoting prosperity, completely rolled together. Slaughtering any heifer proved financially illogical, resembling torching completely your dwelling for remaining heated during single evenings. Such theological safeguarding concerning bovines functioned at its core as highly logical financial governance disguised within holy garments. Those Vikings worshipped Odin's crows, huging alongside Munin, intellect plus recollection, which soared over the globe each dawn before returning carrying intelligence. Some legendary espionage web comprised of avians. Throughout societies where knowledge plus secrets functioned as life-saving implements, naturally those deities deployed dark crows. Those indigenous populations across the massive prairies placed the bison at the focal core, anchoring their theological plus physical universe. Those bison supplied meals, garments, housing, implements, combustibles, plus holy significance concurrently. Whenever those bison became methodically massacred through colonists during the 19th era, dozens of millions butchered across merely a couple decades, that wasn't purely an environmental disaster. That represented an intentional stroke of societal eradication striking the specific beast which one whole civilization relied upon for survival. Creatures weren't merely supplies throughout the archaic era, they acted as reflections, they acted as allegories, they remained companions, deities. Moreover, the reality that mankind raised creatures toward such prominence teaches people whatever they must grasp concerning how reliant upon beasts we actually remained historically. Humanity inhabits presently a society wherein majority populations remain completely detached regarding this historical truth. Our meals arrive sealed within polymers inside some grocery. Our garments appear artificial. Our illumination derives from some cable inside our masonry. Anyone might traverse their whole existence without once personally relying upon a creature regarding personal preservation. However, this alienation appears novel. Astoundingly novel. practically humiliatingly modern across the chronology spanning mankind's evolution. Across beyond 300,000 years spanning modern hominid evolution, absolutely every single one among our forebears maintained an intimate everyday survival or demise connection alongside those beasts surrounding them. Such expertise regarding ways to hunt targets, those abilities for interpreting creature actions, that comprehension concerning what sections from a carcass to consume, ways to cure the flesh, ways to treat the pelt, ways to melt the grease. That wasn't novelty. That represented the syllabus for remaining breathing. So consider what truly warrants pondering heavily. Any moment you have felt comfortable, any moment you felt heated, any moment you avoided starvation, any moment you possessed adequate energy to reason lucidly regarding matters beyond instant preservation, you remained balanced atop the legacy concerning some partnership linking mankind alongside beasts, which stretches historically deeper than linguistics, deeper than paintings, deeper than society itself. That initial pact, mankind ever forged, avoided involving one another. It involved the untamed beasts. Thus, within the absolutely strictest definition conceivable, this treaty remains the cause you exist today currently. The explanation we may read, scribe, construct, ponder, plus pose philosophical queries concerning our position across this cosmos, rather than trembling outside amidst pure blackness frantically attempting to determine whither that massive mastodon migrated exists, because eventually throughout human history, our early forebears discovered precisely that humanity required creatures significantly deeper than anyone could reimburse.